So I've gone ahead in the parashas, and I'm going through Parashat Matot Maseh, which is the end of Bamidbar, which is we'll come to in a week's time.
Okay.
And talks about oaths and vows. And the interesting thing is, in biblical times, that a father, a daughter, could have her, if she made a vow, her father could override it. But if he didn't say anything about it and left it, it was valid. The same applies to a married woman, that the husband, her new husband or husband could also have a say over her vows. And but if it didn't bother him, then it stood. So this might come across as politically incorrect in today's times, but I don't know if you have any take on it. Why especially a married woman couldn't have that her husband could intervene and have a vow cancelled. Damon, or Arthur, Gavin, any thoughts about that?
I have no thoughts on it. I have no idea.
Arthur?
I have a good thought on it. I actually... sorry, Arthur.
Now carry on, you go first.
No, I've got a good... Well, my thought was that Damon was going to answer it. That was my thought.
Okay, what's your answer, Arthur?
No, I just want to know, you mean to say that he can override her vow or what?
Yes, if she makes a vow, if she says, I will do this, from this day forth, I will do X, Y, Z, and she makes a commitment, or
I think her husband can only annul vows that affect him, and that would affect.
But that affects his life directly. Okay.
Yeah.
Unless he needs approval on a vow.
What did you say?
You might need approval on vows, especially vows that impact him.
Yeah, but she does affect his life directly. Because if she makes a vow and she doesn't keep to it, she gets irritable, and then it gets to him. So he has to annul the vow so she doesn't get irritable.
That's true. Guys, let's start the share. We've got a lot to cover.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of time.
And we don't have a lot of time. All right. So the first thing I want to do is I want to show you on the screen the chapter of share screen. Just give me a second. Okay, now you can see Brendan's joined us. So Brendan, what the case of it is that if you have a look at Exodus chapter 21, verse 36, which I've got on the screen for the guys, okay, and 37, okay. If you look at Exodus chapter 21, verse 37, Gavin, just read, when any party
steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it, that person shall pay 5 oxen for the ox and 4 sheep for the sheep.
Yeah. So what the general rule is as follows, is that as far as the Gemara is concerned, a thief pays double. Robber only has to pay the principal back. I'll tell you another time. I don't want to digress too much, but if you steal a sheep, you pay 4-fold. If you steal an ox, you pay 5-fold. So if you're a thief, it's not the smartest thing to steal. Okay, so that's the premise upon which we basing this issue. Okay, now that I've shared that pasuk with the guys in terms of where it is, there's an Amoraic ruling that if a custodian who claims that an item deposited with him was stolen by another person, Rav Chia bar Abba said in the name of Rav Yochanan, one who is an unpaid custodian and claims a claim of theft by a thief with respect to a deposit that has been entrusted to him for safekeeping when he in fact has stolen it, pays the careful payment, which is the twofold payment. Okay. And what the careful payment consists of, Brendan, is it's the principal. So if he steals 100 zuz, he pays 200 zuz. The 100 zuz is the principal, and the 100 zuz is the penalty that matches the principal. Okay. The penalty goes to the victim. Yeah, it goes to the victim. And if it was a sheep or ox and he slaughtered or sold it, he pays the fourfold and fivefold payment. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just close these two doors. Just going to explain to you that where it's based. Okay. Sorry guys, just give us a second. Yeah, I'm used to when I was in Carisbrook or Tota giving it in my own environment. It's difficult for you in that house, and people naturally there's noise. So we go to a different part as far as we're concerned of Exodus, Shmot chapter 22, verse 6 to 8. And that's basically, guys, referring to an unpaid custodian. And it teaches only if he claims and gives an oath that the deposit was stolen, thereby exempting himself, and it's discovered that he himself took it, he pays careful. It doesn't discuss the fourfold or fivefold payment at all. So in this case, Rav Yochanan asserts that in the event that the deposit was a sheep, or an ox, and the custodian slaughtered it or sold it, he's liable to the fourfold or fivefold payment as well. Okay. Now, according to the Rambam, this pertains only if he slaughtered or sold it after swearing falsely. According to the Ravad, he maintains that it applies even if he slaughtered or sold it before the false oath. So, but in principle, that's not discussed by anybody other than Rav Yochanan. So we want to know how Rav Yochanan provides the basis for the ruling. Very straightforward logic. Since an actual thief pays the twofold payment, and an unpaid custodian who falsely claims a claim of theft by thief also pays the twofold payment, it follows that, just as it's true regarding a thief who ordinarily pays the twofold payment, that if he slaughters or sells a sheep or ox that he stole, he pays the fourfold or fivefold payment. So too the same principle holds true with one who claims a claim of theft by thief with respect to a deposit entrusted to him for safekeeping, who also pays a twofold payment. If he happens to slaughter or sell the sheep or ox, he pays a fourfold or fivefold payment. So all we are saying here is it's pretty straightforward. According to Rav Yochanan, he seems to be deriving that law of what you call matzinu, which means where do we find? In other words, it's a simple analogy, it's pure logic. In the absence of any contraindicative information, we say that a specific case mentioned in a verse is taken to be the model for all other cases having the same essential characteristics. So, since an actual thief and a custodian who claims theft, they share the common characteristic, because they're both actual thieves themselves and the claim was theft, that there's a twofold payment. We can reason that if the payment for a theft applies to an unpaid custodian, then in the event of a thief slaughtering or selling a sheep or an ox, there's a four- or fivefold payment, then that should be applied to the custodian who made a false oath of theft, and he in fact kept the animal and slaughtered or sold it. Now, that's so far what we're basing it on, even though the initial case was just with an actual thief. Right. Now, so far, what do you think of this logical analogy, guys? Arthur, what do you think?
Kind of makes sense. I'm exhausted. I'm just trying to figure out. Can you summarize the analogy one more time?
Sure, I know you're exhausted. That's why I picked on you, Bubbles.
You always pick on me.
No, I only pick on you when
It's
you're
all the
exhausted.
hard work I'm doing for you, Dame.
That's
All your hard work I do
racist,
for you.
Damon. That's racist. What you do?
You're
Now,
picking on the
Arthur's
Israeli. It's not fair.
it's not racist. Arthur's as pale as a ghost. He's anemic. We can't call it racist. So what we are saying is as follows.
I'm actually brother than you in my arm. Rest of me to go.
So what we are saying is, Arth, an unpaid custodian who makes a false claim that the object was lost due to an accident where he had a sheep and a wolf took it, and he makes that false oath and he sticks by his guns and witnesses come against him, he's protected. But if he makes a oath that a thief stole it from him, a human thief, and witnesses come against him, it doesn't help if there's evidence to the contrary and he pays the careful payment. He pays double. That's what we learned yesterday. Now, what we are saying is because he acted as a thief and he swore falsely, he's treated as a thief. So Rav Yochanan saying the same thing, that if he happened to apply the rest of the rules of the thief, where if he sold or slaughtered an ox or a sheep, he pays the fourfold payment for a sheep and a fivefold payment for an ox, because he's mimicking exactly what the thief does, and therefore he should be subject to that, since he's subject to the double payment of kefil. That's the logic. Because it's
Okay, now I understand it. So basically, if you act like a thief, you're going to be treated like a thief and pay the punishment.
Exactly. So
Fourfold and
logically,
fivefold, depending on what you do.
So logically, it makes sense, but the Gemara objects to the analogy. Surprise, surprise. Otherwise, it wouldn't be Gemara. So it says, what comparison is this to a thief who is treated more stringently in that he pays the twofold payment even without making a false oath? Will you say that any stringent law stated regarding him equally applies to a custodian who claims a claim of theft by a thief who does not pay the twofold payment unless he makes a false oath? Certainly not. For since in applying the twofold payment itself, the Torah treated an actual thief more stringently than a custodian who claims theft, perhaps it's also treating the thief more stringently in regard to the fourfold or fivefold payment. Okay. So all it's saying is, actually, how can you rely on the analogy to extend a more stringent law where there's no false oath required in order to make a thief subject to the twofold penalty, or and so to the fourfold or fivefold? Who necessarily says that with the custodian, who would also have to almost transgress not only the act of thievery but with a false oath, maybe we don't apply the fourfold or fivefold because a thief is treated more stringently. Now, obviously, guys, you should be thinking that there is a false oath required because with the thief, he's caught red-handed. With the custodian, it entered into his domain legally by agreement. It's just afterwards he decided to get cute. So we're saying that maybe because initially it was a legal thing, and then he lied on top of it, that the stringency wouldn't apply. I would say logically, guys, that in fact the 4 or 5-fold might apply even more, because a thief just stole. This guy stole and lied and used Hashem's name in vain. I could say the opposite.
Exactly like you, but I want to add to that. Over and above that is the fact that this guy, you had his complete trust. You know, you gave him your confidence or whatever. What do you call it? I don't know. You know, because he's probably a mate of yours. You normally get somebody to your house that is a mate or friend or somebody that you kind of know. Whereby somebody coming in from, say, he's in your home and he's right there. He's got access to do anything. Whereby a thief comes from the outside. So this is even worse, because you put your full trust in this guy and he's gone and backstabbed you. Whereby a thief, no one trusts a thief.
Correct. Except the one point of your last thing is we do deal with cases where theft occurs from an inside job, meaning not everybody has the tenacity to break in and dig tunnels. I mean, I'm out of my fitness level. I wouldn't be able to do that. But there's something that, for example, that you go into somebody's home, you have somebody for a Shabbos meal, and then when everybody's going to Vas, he takes maybe a ring when somebody takes it off to Vas. or he takes Shevis Regal off the shelf. So sometimes a thief can be an inside job of somebody that's allowed in your home, Gavin.
No, so I'm actually agreeing with that. So even in that case, it's the same thing as even if it's a custodian or whether
exactly,
it's
but
an
the
internal
difference
thief.
is it's not worse because that is still considered a thief as opposed to and it's somebody you know. So it's equal. It is equal. But the two factors here is that number one, they both stole. But a unpaid custodian is worse because, as you said, they've damaged the trust. But even more so, they took a Torah scroll and used Hashem's name in vain. So if anything, a thief just stole, and this person stole and used Hashem's name in vain, so he should be eligible to the fourfold or fivefold. But it doesn't mention this in the Gemara. It's just Damon Kabb's limited opinion. So the Gemara says Rav Yochanan doesn't rely merely on an analogy. They say it's a hekesh. So, Brendan, I just want to explain to you what a hekesh actually is. If you look at the law in the Chumash in Shmot chapter 22, verse 6 to 8, it juxtaposes the laws of an actual thief and a custodian who claims theft. So that constitutes a hekesh, which teaches us to compare the two subjects, according to Rashi. So let me explain to you what I mean. The first thing we learn in Bava Kamma is the first and the second daf, which is 2a. We learn that there is an Av and a Tordos. Guys, do you remember this? And there's an Av Malocha and a Tordos Malocha. The bottom line is we learn the 39 Malochas prohibitions of Shabbos from the building of the Mishkan. Whatever creative activity was used in building the Mishkan is an act prevented on Shabbos. So Hekesh means the pasuk on keeping Shabbos occurs after the Mishkan. So we derive the laws from the continued pasuk. So that's what Rav Yochanan relies on in this case. Now, it's a Hekesh, and why is a Hekesh so strong? Is that we do not raise logical arguments against the comparison made by Hekesh. So all we are saying is an argument could be raised if there's logic against logic, okay? So if you want to extend the fourfold or fivefold payment from a case of an actual thief to that of a custodian who claims theft, as the Gemara just stated, you can have an opposing argument. But since there's a scriptural hekesh that compare the two contexts, we actually ignore the logical argument that would differentiate between them. Why? Because the fourfold or fivefold payment stated regarding a thief to a custodian is documented, and scriptural proof trumps logic, always. That's the rule. And I'm going to share something which I'd like Gavin to read. And the reason why I'd like Gavin to read it is because Gavin's gone AWOL for a sec. I'm watching each and every.
I am, yeah.
I'm teasing. I'm teasing. No, I'm teasing.
But I'll read again. I don't mind being picked on. It's racist once again, but it's fun.
Okay.
Everything's racist. Anything that I don't agree with is racist.
Okay.
Also, I don't have to argue it. The
but you must understand. Sorry.
Sorry.
No, I wanted to say about the racist thing. It's not racist. He's picking on the Cohen, and I'm a Israelite. So I mean, he's picking us. That's the race.
Yeah. Listen, stay away from all the tribes, Damon. This is safer. All right. Okay. The Hekesh. Okay, I gave him a warning. You saw that. It was quite stern as well. The Hekesh appears. You can see Damon's shivering in his boots there. The Hekesh appears in the passage of the unpaid custodian, which reads in its entirety, Exodus, whatever.
Exodus, whatever.
Look hectic. Okay. If a man shall give his fellow money or utensils to safeguard, and it is stolen from the house of man, if the thief is found, he shall pay double. If the thief is not found, then the householder shall approach the court to swear that he did not lay his hand upon his fellow's property. For any matter of liability, for an ox, for a donkey, for a sheep, for a garment, for any lost article, about which he says, this is it, to the judges shall come both their claims. Whoever judges find guilty shall pay twofold to his fellow.
Perfect.
Scroll it up.
Perfect.
According.
No, you don't. That's it. So if a man shall give his fellow money and it's stolen from the house of the man, what it's saying is there, the person is claiming that it was stolen from him. And if the thief is not found, meaning they don't apprehend the thief that stole from the custodian, then the householder, who's the custodian, has to swear to the court he didn't lay his hand upon his fellow's liability. You get what I'm saying? So that's where the hekesh comes from the pasuk, not 7 but 6 and 8 specifically. Okay, so let me just explain to you what I'm saying, Gavin. That was well read, and I do respect the code, by the way. Really, you have my respect, just generally. Okay, so the Gemara says, all right, so it's satisfactory according to the one who says that one verse in the passage of the unpaid custodian deals with an actual thief, okay? And that's juxtaposed against the other verse that deals with a custodian who falsely claims a claim of theft by the thief. And according to the opinion as well, guys, it fits well. It's a hekesh. But you have got a different opinion that says it's not quite a hekesh, because it uses the phrase, if the thief is found. And then it's got a different verse, and if the thief is not found. So, in other words, both of them deal with the custodian who claims a claim of theft by a thief. In other words, you can read the pasuk one of two ways. You can either say the one pasuk deals with an actual thief and the other one with a custodian, or the other way to read it is that, you know, the custodian's claiming there was a thief, and if you don't find the thief, the custodian has to swear that he's innocent, and then you've got a problem, because then the hekesh doesn't exist. So according to that opinion, where there's no hekesh, we want to say, how does Rav Yochanan derive that the full fivefold payment prescribed for an actual thief who slaughters or sells applies to a custodian who claims theft as well? It's a good question. So the Gemara says, look, they use this word, the thief. Okay, it could have just stated the word thief without the definitive hey, stating the thief. Okay, but when there's a definitive article, it's a different case. Why? Because the definitive article is basically to teach that all penalties that apply to an actual thief apply to the custodian who falsely claims theft. Because both the twofold payment prescribed for the theft alone and the 4 or 5-fold payment prescribed for slaughtering or selling an ox or sheep has the definitive article. That's according to Rashi. Okay. So that's a reasonable explanation. Now, Rav Yochanan is also challenged from another side. Rav Chia bar Abba challenged Rav Yochanan from the following brisa. And the brisa actually is almost identical with the Mishnah that we're going to learn in the 108th daf. Don't worry, guys, we're getting there due time. And that's in Shavuos 49a. But the brisa contains one important variation from the Mishnah, because it deals with a custodian who is apprehended by witnesses, testifying now that he ate the animal that has been entrusted to him, not that he merely stole it. Okay, so why is that a challenge? I'll tell you why. Because if one said to an unpaid custodian, "Where's my ox that I entrusted to your care?" the custodian replies, "It was stolen, I'm exempt from payment." And the owner said to him, "I adjure you that your response is true." And the custodian said, "Amen." And after witnesses come to testify against the custodian that they saw he ate it himself, the custodian pays the twofold payment. Now, if you're looking at it, that is actually a strong argument against Rav Yochanan, because Rav Yochanan says that there's a 4-5-fold. Now, why is it such a strong argument? Because how can you eat something, guys, if there wasn't a ritual slaughter as a Jew? Which means if they saw him eat the animal, but they didn't see him slaughter it, how can he eat something that hasn't had a proper shchita? Now, you might say, but the guy's a thief. What does he worry about kosher food for? Believe me, there's been a lot of people that look from, and they've got mishakasim about being kosher, but their ethics are a little bit dodgy, or they're not nice. People are very complex. Very, very complex.
You're talking about a lot of the Chalab Yisrael oaks, those oaks.
Careful, Gavin. We don't.
I'm joking. I'm joking. I'm joking. It's a joke. It was a joke. It was a joke.
Gavin, you
Might
can't
be
mix milk
get that up.
and meat together.
All right, guys,
that's
let's
it.
just let's just stay
Let's
on
carry
track.
on. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Couldn't resist that one.
Listen, I
It
was
cost me dearly, trust me.
no, it doesn't. So listen, so what we're saying is, if you saw a Jewish oak eat the food, you can assume he gave it a ritual slaughter. Then why does this Brisa say only pays a twofold payment? Because if he slaughters the ox or the sheep, he should pay the four or fivefold payment. Because how can he eat it without a ritual slaughter? So this seems to be a proof against Rav Yochanan, the Brisa. So they're going to punch holes in the Brisa. Don't you worry about a thing. So now here, where it is impossible for even an olive's volume of meat to be eaten without a ritual slaughter, it's obvious that the custodian who was seen eating it must have first slaughtered it, whether they saw him slaughter it or not. Okay. Yet the Brisa teaches that he pays a twofold payment, which implies the twofold payment is indeed paid, but the fourfold or fivefold payment for the custodian he does not pay. So we are saying that this might prove that the custodian is limited to a twofold payment and doesn't mimic the thief in terms of the fourfold payment for stealing a sheep, nor the fivefold for stealing an ox. So Rav Yochanan answers and says a brilliant answer. He said, what are we dealing with here? We're dealing with a case where the custodian ate the animal as a nevela without slaughtering it. So I just want to explain to Brendan what a nevela actually is. So a nevela is basically an animal that basically didn't get a ritual slaughter. In other words, it might have had a invalid slaughter. The esophagus or the trachea wasn't slaughtered properly, or but it still has to be, apart from the blood, there still has to be the right sort of way to slaughter it. Do you get what I'm saying? So this was a Jew that Rav Yochanan said, if he doesn't care about stealing, what would he care about a ritual slaughter? Because this is already a Jew that used Hashem's name in vain, okay, on a Torah scroll, and he stole. You think he's that worried about kashrut? No. You see, guys. So that's not a proof. In fact, it would be more unusual that he's worried about kashrut if he's not worried about. In fact, it's not like a normal thief. This guy actually used Hashem's name in vain, and he stole. So he might not be worried about kashrut. So just because you see him eating it doesn't mean that it means he did a ritual slaughter. Now, the Gemara asks a very, very good question. And that question is as follows, is, well, before we get there, listen, you might wonder, maybe the witnesses didn't see the custodian slaughter the animal. So we can assume that he did slaughter it, but Brendan, we actually lack the requisite evidence to impose the additional penalty. So the answer would seem to be that if you see him eat it, there must have been a ritual slaughter. Do you get what I'm saying? But we don't quite know. So this is the good point, guys. The Gemara wonders why Rav Yochanan is choosing to deflect the challenge with this particular answer, because according to Rav Chia bar Abba, he could have dealt with a case where it's a treifa. What do you mean a treifa? Do you know what a treifa is? Okay, so the word treifa, when you're learning about kashrut at first, is about kosher versus treif. So treif is the opposite of kosher, meaning it's prohibited for eating. But actually, there's a halachic definition. Treifa is an animal that's dead animal walking. It's got a terminal disease. And if it has a treifa defect, it's prohibited for consumption. Do you get what I'm saying? If it's about to die. So if you have a look, the Tana Rabbi Shimon maintains in a Mishnah that we learned in Bava Kamma in 70a, you guys, you'll remember this, that one isn't, Brendan, are you with me? No, let Gene do it. Let's close. Let's just close that door a second. Sorry, guys, give me a sec. So, all right, Brendan, what the argument is why doesn't Rav Yochanan just turn it around and say it's a treifa? Meaning he did a ritual slaughter, but he finds out afterwards the animal has got a defect that made it terminal. It's got some pulmonary disease or something that you can't eat it, and he only realized after ritual slaughter. Now, it's interesting because, guys, do you remember there was a Tana, Rabbi Shimon, who maintains that you're not liable to a fourfold or fivefold payment for the slaughter of a treifa. Remember, that was in the 70th daf. Guys, you must remember. I was in... all right.
No, it does ring. It rings a bell. I didn't remember it clearly, but I do recall it.
The thief isn't responsible for slaughtering an animal that's a treifa, even if he gave it a proper ritual slaughter, because it's null and void. He can't eat the animal. But, so we're saying, why doesn't Rav Yochanan give that answer? It's more plausible. Why does he give this thing of a nevela? And this is the issue, is that he doesn't hold by Rabbi Shimon's opinion. Because Rabbi Shimon's opinion is that the slaughter in this case doesn't trigger a fourfold or fivefold payment, because you can't eat the animal even after a proper ritual slaughter. And the nevela is more brazen. And the reason is because Rabbi Yochanan agrees with Rabbi Meir. And Rabbi Meir says, as long as the shechita, the ritual slaughter, is performed properly, it's deemed a legitimate slaughter. And the thief who performs it is liable to the full fivefold payment, even if afterwards they find for some reason the animal is not fit for consumption. It's a proper ritual slaughter, so therefore there's he has to pay. So Rabbi Yochanan obviously goes with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who says that a slaughter that is not fit doesn't render the animal permissible for consumption. It's still termed a slaughter if it's a proper halachic slaughter. You're only finding out afterwards it's not, but the slaughter itself is fine. Animal happens to be terminal anyway. So even if the animal is a treifa, one becomes liable to the fourfold or fivefold payment for slaughtering it. And guys, that's why he used the example of a nevela and not a treifa. It's very important. He holds by Rabbi Meir, not Rabbi Shimon. So the Gemara asks further to Rav Yochanan, to Rav Chia, why don't you deal with the ben Pekua? I don't know if you remember what a ben Pekua was. We learned it. All right. A ben Pekua is the child of a sundered one. What does this mean in simple English? Basically, guys, a fetus that's found alive inside a cow, right? The cow got a ritual slaughter, but when a womb is cut open posthumously, they find that there's a calf. Now, according to Rabbi Shimon Shizuri, in Chulin 74a, the mother shechita suffices for the fetus as well. Even if it eventually grows up to adulthood, it can be eaten without a shechita. So Rav Yochanan could have answered that this brisa, which implies that the custodian ate the stolen animal, is not liable to the fourfold or fivefold payment, because even if they saw him eating it, it could have been a ben Pekua, according to Rav Shimon Shezuri. But the problem is very straightforward. Is because he holds by Rabbi Meir. And Rabbi Meir disagrees with Rabbi Shimon Shezuri and holds that the shechita of a mother is ineffective for a full-term fetus. In other words, any viable animal entrusted to a custodian would require shechita. So once this calf grows up, it needs a shechita like any other animal. Just because it's not at a shechita, Rabbi Meir doesn't agree. And it was found that Rabbi Meir is again held by Rav Yochanan, and therefore he can't use this example of that particular animal, a ben Pekua. All right, guys, we need the 4.5 minutes. I need you to concentrate, then we're done, believe me. All right, because I don't want to repeat any of this on Saturday night. So the Gemara asks further, why doesn't Rav Yochanan answer Rav Chia Ba'aba that it deals with a case where the custodian stood for judgment and lost, and the court said to him, go pay him. And then he slaughtered and ate the animal. In that situation, he's not liable to the 4 or 5-fold payment, because Rava said if the court found a person guilty of stealing an animal, he only has to pay him the 2-fold payment. And then after the judgment was made, he decided to slaughter or sell the animal. He's not liable to the 4-fold or 5-fold payment because a ruling was rendered halachically at the time when he just stole the animal. And therefore, since the court concluded the matter by inserting a final ruling, okay, once it issued the final verdict and he then slaughtered or sold the animal, he's doing so as a robber, not a thief. because he's now robbing his own animal after he's done the twofold to slaughter it. So the rendering was done. Because the court could have said to him, you're obligated to pay. And then if he slaughtered or sold the animal, he is liable to the 4 or 5-fold payment. Why? Because if it was a suggestion that go and pay, it's a ruling. If it says you're obligated to pay, it's a suggestion. So as long as the matter wasn't concluded with the issuance of a final verdict, he's still considered a thief. So the Gemara wants to know, why didn't Rav Yochanan explain the Brisa as dealing with the case where the court told the custodian, go pay him, that's our verdict, and then he ate the animal, which means he got off because he was just at that point having to pay double. He never sold it to another party, the animal, nor slaughtered it. So the Gemara says, and according to your reasoning, Rav Yochanan should have searched for an alternative answer. So let him say to Rav Chia that the Brisa deals maybe, guys, we've got 2.5 minutes, all I need, with a business partner who slaughtered the animal without his fellow's consent. Rather, we must conclude that Rav Yochanan chose one of 2 or 3 possible answers, and he did not mean that his answer is the only acceptable one. So what we are saying is you have 2 thieves, Brendan, and the one, they both steal the animal. There were 2 custodians, and they both steal the animal, and the one custodian decides to slaughter it and eat it or sell it to his mate. Now, if the other custodian that they were in on it in cahoots together didn't agree, there's no 4 or 5-fold payment, because it has to be a full animal that you've stolen in order to trigger a 4 or 5-fold payment. Because we don't pay halves. You can't pay half of a 4 or 5-fold penalty, because that's 2.5 times. So in other words, you have to steal the animal in its entirety, be the sole thief, and then slaughter or sell it in order to trigger the 4 or 5-fold payment. So if you have partners in crime, Rav Yochanan could have said he had a partner in crime and the one partner sold it, in which he wouldn't trigger the 4 or 5-fold penalty. So all we are saying is, guys, Rav Yochanan could have answered with any of these answers and it would have sufficed. Just Rav Yochanan didn't need to mention 1,000,000 answers. One is enough to rebuff it. But Rav Yochanan, you must know, was so smart, he thought of every one of these. The Gemara just has this as a conversation to engender a bit of creativity on our part. All right, guys, you want to ask anything, we're done.